I watched my ex-husband's lips curl into that familiar cruel smirk through the rain, his mistress laughing beside him in the passenger seat, her manicured hand resting possessively on his thigh. The muddy water my ex-husband intentionally splashed on me dripped from my pregnant belly, soaking through my dress, and for a split second, I saw recognition flash across his face. Not remorse, but shock. He hadn't expected to see me here, hadn't expected me to be glowing, hadn't expected me to be carrying the child he'd sworn I could never have. His mistress leaned forward, her red lips moving with words I couldn't hear but could easily imagine, and that's when my phone buzzed in my pocket. My husband, the man the business world called the silent storm, the billionaire who'd promised on our wedding night that anyone who hurt me would regret it. I answered, my voice steadier than I felt. "Elias," I said simply, "I need you." What I didn't know was that those 3 words would trigger a chain of events that would dismantle my ex-husband's entire world in less than 72 hours. Before we jump into this story, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and drop a like. Comment below and tell me where you're watching from. I want to see all of you joining this story. The rain had started as a drizzle that morning, but by the time I stepped out of the small organic market in Ravenshire, it had become a downpour. I should have waited it out inside, should have ordered a car, should have done a lot of things differently. But I'd been craving fresh strawberries all morning, and my pregnancy cravings didn't care about weather forecasts or common sense. I was 5 months pregnant now, finally showing enough that strangers smiled at me knowingly in elevators and offered their seats on the rare occasions I took public transport. My husband, Elias Blackwood, insisted I didn't need to do anything as mundane as grocery shopping myself, but I'd fought hard to maintain some normalcy in my life. Being married to one of Britain's wealthiest men came with enough restrictions. I refused to give up simple pleasures like picking out my own fruit. The bags were heavier than I'd anticipated, and I paused at the curb, trying to figure out how to juggle them while pulling out my phone to call for the car. That's when I heard the engine rev. A sound that triggered something primal in my nervous system, some animal instinct that recognized danger before my conscious mind could process it. The black SUV came out of nowhere, or maybe I just wasn't paying attention. Either way, it hit the puddle at exactly the right angle, sending a tsunami of muddy, oily water crashing over me with such force that I stumbled backward, dropping both bags. Organic strawberries rolled across the wet pavement like tiny red casualties of war. For a moment, everything went silent except for the ringing in my ears. Then I heard it. The laughter. 2 distinct voices, one male and one female, both cruel in that particular way that only comes from people who've never experienced real consequences. The SUV's window rolled down, and my entire body went cold despite the warm rain. Miles Grantham, my ex-husband, the man who'd spent 3 years of marriage systematically destroying my self-worth before I'd finally found the courage to leave. But he wasn't alone. Beside him, in the passenger seat where I used to sit during our marriage, was Vanessa Hartley, the woman he'd been sleeping with for the last year of our marriage, the woman he'd sworn meant nothing, the woman who'd sent me photos of them together with captions like "He likes a real woman" and "Hope you're enjoying being replaced." They were both staring at me now, and the look on their faces made my stomach turn. Not guilt, not surprise, just pure, malicious satisfaction. "Oh my God," Vanessa's voice rang out, high-pitched and delighted. "Is that really you, Clara? Looking a little rough there, aren't you?" She leaned closer to Miles, her hand sliding higher up his thigh in a gesture so deliberately possessive it was almost comical. "Babe, didn't you say she was infertile? That's definitely a pregnancy pillow or something, right?" Miles's eyes narrowed as he studied my belly. I watched the calculations happening behind his gaze, watched him count backward, watched realization dawn. When we'd divorced 2 years ago, the court documents had been sealed at my lawyer's insistence, but everyone in our social circle had known why. He'd humiliated me publicly, again and again, always coming back to the same cruel theme. I couldn't give him children. I was defective, broken, useless. "That's not possible," Miles said slowly, but I could hear the uncertainty creeping into his voice. "You can't have children. Every doctor we saw said..." "That I had challenges," I interrupted, finding my voice despite the trembling in my hands. "They said I had challenges, Miles, not impossibilities. But you never bothered to listen to the distinction, did you?" Vanessa's perfectly painted face twisted into something ugly. "Oh, please. If you're actually pregnant, which I doubt, you probably trapped some poor fool into thinking it's his. That's what women like you do when you can't get a man any other way." "Women like me?" I felt my jaw clench. "What exactly does that mean, Vanessa?" "Desperate, used up, past your prime." She examined her nails with theatrical boredom. "Did you really think you could do better than Miles? He's successful, handsome, from an excellent family. Whatever sad little rebound you found is probably already regretting tying himself to damaged goods." Miles laughed. That same condescending sound that used to make me feel small enough to disappear. "Come on, Clara, tell us. Who's the father? Some desperate middle manager you met at a support group? A divorced teacher from that pathetic school where you work? Does he know about your broken womb? Or did you conveniently forget to mention that before you baby-trapped him?" I should have walked away, should have ignored them, gotten in my car, driven off with my dignity intact. But something in me snapped. Maybe it was the pregnancy hormones. Maybe it was 2 years of therapy finally paying off. Or maybe I was just tired of letting Miles Grantham write the narrative of my life. "His name is Elias Blackwood," I said clearly, "and he knows everything about my medical history. He was there for every appointment, every ultrasound, every moment of fear and hope. He's more of a man in one day than you were in 3 years of marriage, Miles." The effect was immediate and electric. Miles's face went white, then red, then white again. Vanessa's smug expression faltered for just a second before she recovered. But that second was enough to tell me she recognized the name. Everyone recognized that name, Elias Blackwood, founder and CEO of Blackwood Global Industries, 34 years old and worth an estimated £12 billion, featured on the cover of Forbes, Fortune, and every other business magazine in existence. Known for being ruthlessly efficient, impossibly private, and absolutely unforgiving to anyone who crossed him. The man the financial world called the Silent Storm, because he destroyed his enemies so quietly they didn't realize they were drowning until the water was over their heads. "You're lying," Miles said, but his voice had lost its confidence. "Elias Blackwood wouldn't marry someone like you. He dates models and actresses. I've seen the photos." "Those photos are from 5 years ago," I said calmly. "He hasn't been photographed with anyone in over 2 years. We met at a literacy fundraiser 18 months ago. We married quietly 6 months later. And unlike you, Miles, he doesn't need to parade his relationship publicly to feel validated." Vanessa recovered first, her voice sharp with defensive venom. "Even if that's true, which I seriously doubt, it doesn't change what you are. You're still the woman who couldn't give Miles a child. You're still the wife who wasn't enough. And you know what?" She leaned out the window slightly, her voice dropping to a theatrical whisper that was clearly meant to carry. "I'm 3 months pregnant. Miles is finally getting the family he always wanted, with a real woman who actually works." The words hit like a physical blow. Not because I still loved Miles. God, I hadn't loved him in years. But because some small wounded part of me that therapy hadn't quite healed flinched at the implication that I had been the problem, that Miles had been right all along, that my body was a betrayal. Miles's grin returned, wider now, feeding off my visible pain. See? That's the difference between you and Vanessa, Clara. She's fertile, healthy, capable, everything you're not. He revved the engine again, and I instinctively stepped back, remembering other times he'd used his size, his presence, his power to intimidate me. Whatever lie you've told yourself about this pregnancy, you know the truth. You'll lose this baby just like you lost ours, and when Elias Blackwood realizes what a defective mess he married, he'll leave you just like I did. You're cursed, Clara. Accept it. Then he drove off, speeding through another puddle deliberately, soaking me again. Their laughter echoed down the street even after the SUV disappeared around a corner. I stood there, frozen, water dripping from my hair, my clothes, my hands. A small crowd had gathered, their phones out. Of course they had their phones out. Everything was content now. Everything was shareable. My humiliation would probably be viral by dinner time. Are you all right, dear? An elderly woman approached cautiously, holding an umbrella over both of us. That was absolutely vile. Do you need me to call someone? My phone was already buzzing in my pocket. I pulled it out with shaking hands, water droplets falling on the screen. Elias's name flashed. He always seemed to know when something was wrong, even before I did. Clara? His voice was warm, concerned. The voice that had slowly taught me what safety felt like. Are you still at the market? You've been gone longer than expected. I opened my mouth to say I was fine, to protect him from this ugliness, to handle it myself like I'd learned to do during my marriage to Miles. But then I remembered what my therapist had said. You married Elias because he's safe, but you won't have a real marriage until you let him see your unsafe moments too. Elias, I said, and my voice cracked on his name. I need you. The silence on the other end lasted exactly 2 seconds. When he spoke again, his voice had changed completely. Still calm, still controlled, but with an edge of steel underneath that I'd only heard a handful of times. Where exactly are you? Stay there. Don't move. I'm coming. You don't need to. Clara. Just my name, but in a tone that made it clear the discussion was over. Send me your exact location, now. I did as he asked because arguing with Elias when he went into protective mode was pointless. Besides, I was tired of being strong. Tired of handling everything alone. Tired of pretending that words couldn't hurt me when I was still learning how to believe I deserved better. A young woman approached me, maybe mid-20s, dressed in yoga clothes and carrying a coffee. I got the whole thing on video, she said quickly. Their faces, the license plate, everything they said. That was assault and harassment. If you want to press charges, I'll be a witness. So will I, a man in a business suit added. I know who that was. Miles Grantham, real estate developer. Always thought he was a prick, but this confirms it. More people crowded around, offering tissues, water, umbrellas, support. Strangers showing me more kindness in 5 minutes than Miles had in 3 years. It should have made me feel better, but it just made me feel more exposed. My trauma was now public property. She said she's married to Elias Blackwood. Someone whispered behind me. Do you think that's true? God, if it is. Miles Grantham just signed his own death warrant. You don't mess with Blackwood's people. I heard he destroyed an entire company because they tried to poach one of his employees. Imagine what he'll do to someone who hurt his wife. The elderly woman with the umbrella squeezed my arm gently. Whatever happens next, remember that you didn't deserve that treatment. That man and his girlfriend, they showed exactly who they are. And it's not pretty. Elias arrived exactly 9 minutes later. I knew because I'd been watching the seconds tick by on my phone, each one feeling like an hour. His car was understated, a black Bentley that looked like 1,000 other luxury vehicles in London, but I recognized it immediately. recognized him as he stepped out, tall and lean in a charcoal gray suit, his dark hair slightly disheveled from running his hands through it. Something he only did when he was stressed. His eyes found me instantly, and I watched his expression shift from concern to confusion, to cold, absolute fury in the space of a heartbeat. Not fury at me, never at me, but at whoever had left me standing in the rain covered in mud and shaking like a leaf. He was at my side in seconds, his jacket already off and wrapping around my shoulders despite my protests. What happened? Are you hurt? Is the baby... His hands were gentle as they ran over my arms, checking for injuries, his touch clinical and careful despite the rage I could see building behind his eyes. We're fine, physically. It was Miles. The words came out in a rush now, tumbling over each other. He drove through a puddle on purpose. He and Vanessa, they said horrible things. About me, about the baby, about us. They said I'm defective and cursed and that you'll leave me when you realize what a mistake you made. Vanessa's pregnant and Miles said that proves it was always my fault, that I'm the problem, that I'll lose this baby too, and... Stop. Elias's voice was quiet but absolute. He cupped my face in his hands, forcing me to meet his eyes. Breathe, Clara. Just breathe. He waited until my frantic inhales slowed to something more normal before continuing. Now listen to me very carefully. You are not defective. You are not cursed. You are not a mistake. You are my wife, the mother of my child, and the best decision I've ever made. Do you understand? I nodded, but the tears were falling now, mixing with the rain and mud on my face. Miles Grantham is a pathetic excuse for a man who couldn't handle being married to someone stronger than him. So he broke you down to make himself feel big. That says everything about him and nothing about you. His jaw clenched. And he's going to regret this. I promise you that. Elias, don't do anything. Illegal? I won't. Unethical? Never. His smile was cold enough to freeze. Fire. But Miles built his company on shaky ground, and I'm going to make sure everyone knows it. I'm not going to destroy him, Clara. I'm just going to stop propping him up. The house of cards will fall on its own. The young woman with the video approached hesitantly. Mr. Blackwood? I'm sorry to interrupt, but I have footage of everything. If your wife wants to press charges, I'm happy to provide evidence. Elias looked at the woman, then at me. It's your choice, Clara. Whatever you want to do, I'll support you. But I want you to know that you have options. You're not powerless here. I thought about it. Thought about dragging Miles to court, reliving everything in front of cameras and lawyers and judges. Thought about becoming a public spectacle, my pain dissected and analyzed and commodified. I'd spent 3 years being powerless in my marriage to Miles. I'd spent 2 years rebuilding myself. Did I really want to give him any more of my energy? No charges, I said finally. I don't want to give him that much space in my life. I just want him to leave me alone. Elias nodded slowly. Understood. But I'm still going to make some calls. Not revenge, Clara. Accountability. There's a difference. On the drive home, Elias held my hand while his driver navigated through London traffic. He didn't speak much, just kept running his thumb over my knuckles in that soothing pattern he'd developed whenever I was anxious, but I could see his mind working, could practically hear the calculations happening behind those sharp gray eyes. What are you thinking? I asked quietly. I'm thinking about how Miles Grantham secured his last 3 major contracts. I'm thinking about the loans he's carrying. I'm thinking about his investors and his board members, and how much of his company's success is built on reputation rather than actual substance. He glanced at me. I'm thinking that reputation is a fragile thing, especially when it's built on lies. You're scaring me a little. Good. Miles should be scared too. He assaulted my pregnant wife in public and made defamatory statements that could harm your mental health. If he thinks I'm going to let that slide because we move in similar business circles, he's about to learn exactly how wrong he is. By the time we got home to the Blackwood estate, I was exhausted. Elias drew me a bath, helped me out of my ruined clothes, and sat on the edge of the tub while I soaked, washing the mud from my hair with gentle hands. "Tell me about her," he said softly. "Vanessa, you've never really talked about her." I closed my eyes. She worked for Miles's company, marketing, I think. She was beautiful, confident, everything I wasn't during our marriage. Miles used to compare us constantly. Her waist to mine, her career to my teaching, her sophistication to my simplicity. I swallowed hard. When I found the first email, I confronted him. He said I was being paranoid and jealous. When I found the photos, he said it was a mistake. When I found them in our bed, he said it was my fault for not being woman enough to keep him interested. Elias's hands stilled in my hair. "He said that to you?" "He said worse, but that's the one that stuck, I think. The idea that I was fundamentally lacking something essential." I opened my eyes, looking up at him. Today, when she said she was pregnant, when Miles said it proved I was the problem, for a second I believed it. Even though I know better. Even though I'm literally growing our child inside me. That's how deep his words got. "Clara," Elias's voice was rough with emotion. "Look at me." When I did, his eyes were blazing. "You are enough. You have always been enough. And our son?" He placed his hand on my belly, feeling the kick that responded to his touch. "Is proof that you were never the problem. The problem was Miles. The problem was his cruelty, his insecurity, his inability to be a decent human being." He helped me out of the bath, wrapped me in a soft robe, and led me to our bedroom. But instead of letting me rest like I expected, he sat me down at my vanity and pulled up a chair beside me. "I need to tell you something," he said. "And I need you to understand that what I'm about to do, I'm doing because you're my wife, and I love you. Not because I think you can't handle this yourself." My stomach tightened. "Elias, what are you going to do?" Miles Grantham's company, Grantham Urban Holdings, has been circling bankruptcy for the last 18 months. He's drowning in debt, covering it with new loans, and using his family name to maintain investor confidence. 6 months ago, his company bid on a government contract worth £200 million. The only reason he won that contract is because 3 members of the selection committee owe me favors, and I put in a good word. I stared at him. "You helped Miles? Why would you?" "Because I didn't know who he was to you yet. We weren't married. You'd never mentioned your ex-husband's name, just called him my ex. The contract was approved 3 months before our wedding." His expression hardened. "But the contract has a morality clause. If the company's CEO engages in behavior that brings negative publicity or harm to the project, the contract can be terminated. What Miles did today? That's grounds for termination. You're going to take away his contract. I'm going to make a phone call and suggest they review the situation. What they decide to do is up to them. But Clara, that's not all." He pulled out his phone, pulling up what looked like a financial document. "Miles has a £75 million loan with Barrington Bank. The bank's CEO is my godfather. The loan is technically due next month, but they've been rolling it over every quarter for 2 years because Miles keeps promising his company is about to turn a profit. One phone call, and that loan gets called in. Miles doesn't have £75 million. He'd have to sell assets. Lots of assets." My heart was pounding. This is too much. "Elias, I don't want you to ruin him because of me. I'm not ruining him. He ruined himself. I'm just pulling back the curtain so everyone can see what was always there." He took my hands. "But I won't do any of this without your permission. If you want me to let it go, I will. If you want me to handle it quietly, I'll handle it quietly. If you want me to make an example of him so no one ever treats you like that again, I'll do that too. It's your choice. It's always your choice. I thought about Miles's face in the SUV, the cruelty in his smile, the way Vanessa had touched him, claiming ownership, rubbing her pregnancy in my face like a weapon. The years of abuse I'd endured, convinced I deserved it because I couldn't have children. The words that still echoed in my head sometimes late at night when Elias was asleep and my demons came out to play. Do it, I said quietly. Not for revenge, but because he needs to face consequences. For once in his life, Miles Grantham needs to learn that actions have consequences. Elias nodded. Then it's done. He made 3 phone calls that night. Each conversation lasted less than 5 minutes. He was polite, professional, almost casual. But I'd learned to read him over the past 18 months. Beneath that calm exterior was a predator who'd just caught the scent of blood in the water. The video went viral by morning. Someone had posted it to social media with the caption, "Billionaire's wife publicly humiliated by cruel ex-husband and his mistress." Within hours, it had millions of views. Comments flooded in, overwhelmingly supportive of me and damning of Miles. "This is disgusting. He should be in jail." Imagine being so insecure that you have to attack your pregnant ex-wife. The mistress is just as bad. What kind of woman participates in that? If this is really Elias Blackwood's wife, Miles Grantham is finished. Blackwood doesn't forgive. I went to school with Clara. She's literally the sweetest person. This breaks my heart. By noon, major news outlets had picked up the story. Real estate mogul attacks pregnant ex-wife. Shocking video shows public harassment. Miles Grantham under fire for assault allegations. Reporters showed up at the estate, but our security turned them away. My phone wouldn't stop ringing. Former friends, distant relatives, people I hadn't spoken to in years, all suddenly wanting to check in, and definitely looking for gossip to share. Elias fielded most of it, his assistant releasing a brief statement. "Mrs. Blackwood is resting comfortably at home. We appreciate the public's support, but request privacy during this time. We will not be pressing charges, but we trust that appropriate consequences will follow." That last line was the key. Not a threat, just a promise. The consequences started 24 hours after the video went viral. The government contract was suspended pending an ethics review. The official statement was carefully worded. "Recent events have raised concerns about Grantham Urban Holdings' commitment to respectful workplace practices and public conduct. We are conducting a thorough review before proceeding." Miles issued a public apology that was clearly written by a lawyer and completely devoid of sincerity. "I apologize if my actions caused offense. The situation was misunderstood, and I regret any hurt feelings. I'm committed to moving forward positively." The public wasn't buying it. Social media tore the apology apart. If my actions caused offense? That's not an apology, that's blame shifting. He didn't even mention his ex-wife by name. This is PR garbage. Notice how he said nothing about his mistress laughing along. They're both trash. Then Barrington Bank called in the loan. The official reason was restructuring of high-risk portfolios, but everyone knew the real reason. Miles Grantham had 45 days to repay £75 million or face default. His company's stock dropped 30% in a single day. By the end of the week, 2 major investors pulled out completely. Miles's board of directors called an emergency meeting. Rumors started circulating that they were considering removing him as CEO. And through it all, Elias maintained perfect deniability. He hadn't threatened anyone, hadn't made demands, hadn't used his power overtly. He'd simply made a few phone calls, had a few conversations, and let the natural consequences of Miles's actions play out. "You're terrifying," I told him one evening as we watched the news coverage together. You know that, right? He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Only to people who hurt what's mine. Everyone else finds me perfectly charming. You made 3 phone calls and destroyed a man's empire. I made 3 phone calls and removed the artificial support keeping a failing empire upright. Miles did the destroying all by himself. He pulled me closer, his hand resting on my belly. How are you feeling about all this? Honestly? I thought about it. Conflicted. Part of me feels vindicated. Part of me feels guilty for feeling vindicated. Part of me just wants it all to go away. The guilt is because you're a good person, Clara. Miles never had that problem. He never felt guilty for hurting you, did he? No. He always found a way to make it my fault. Then stop feeling guilty for his consequences. You didn't do this to him. You just stopped protecting him from what he deserved. 3 weeks later, Miles lost everything. The government contract was officially terminated. The bank seized assets. His company filed for bankruptcy. His penthouse, his cars, his art collection, all sold at auction. The board voted to remove him as CEO. Even his family distanced themselves, his mother releasing a statement condemning his behavior and apologizing to me personally. Vanessa left him 2 days after the bankruptcy filing. Apparently, being with Miles was only appealing when he was wealthy and successful. Without the money and status, she had no use for him. She terminated her pregnancy shortly after, claiming she wasn't ready to be tied down to someone with no prospects. Miles ended up working as a consultant for a small firm, earning a salary that wouldn't even cover the mortgage on his old home. Everything he'd built, every connection he'd leveraged, every person he'd used, all of it evaporated the moment he was no longer useful. I should have felt satisfied, should have felt vindicated, should have felt something, but mostly I just felt tired. Miles Grantham had taken up so much space in my life, first as my husband, then as my abuser, then as my trauma, and now as my destroyer. I wanted him to stop mattering. I wanted to move on. The universe seemed to agree because 2 weeks after Miles's final fall, something else entirely claimed my attention. Elias and I were attending a charity gala at the Kensington Grand Hotel. It was unavoidable. Elias was receiving an award for his philanthropic work, and my presence was expected. I'd been dreading it, knowing that everyone would stare, whisper, judge. My humiliation was public now. I was the woman from the video, the victim, the object of pity. But when we arrived, something unexpected happened. People approached me not with pity but with respect. Women thanked me for being brave. Men apologized for not recognizing abuse when they saw it. Young girls asked for photos, calling me inspiring. It was overwhelming and confusing and nothing like what I'd expected. Then the organizers asked if I'd say a few words. I can't, I told Elias immediately. I'm not a public speaker. I teach 7-year-olds. I can't get up in front of hundreds of people and... You can. He interrupted gently. But you don't have to. The choice is yours, Clara. It's always yours. I thought about Miles, about how he'd spent years silencing me, making me believe my voice didn't matter. I thought about Vanessa, about how she'd mocked me for being desperate and used up. I thought about all the women who'd sent me messages through social media, sharing their own stories of abuse, thanking me for making them feel less alone. I'll do it, I said. But you're coming with me. I'll be right beside you the whole time. We walked onto that stage together, Elias's hand on the small of my back, steady and grounding. The room fell silent as I approached the microphone, hundreds of faces staring up at me. For a moment my mind went blank with panic. Then I felt it. The baby. Our son. Kicking against my ribs as if to say, "You've got this, Mum." My name is Clara Blackwood. I started, my voice shaking but audible. And 3 weeks ago, a video of me being publicly humiliated by my ex-husband went viral. I'm sure most of you have seen it. If you haven't, I don't recommend watching it. It's not my best angle. A nervous laugh rippled through the crowd. For 3 years, I was married to a man who told me I was worthless, defective, broken. He blamed me for a miscarriage I had no control over. He cheated openly and then told me it was my fault for not being woman enough to keep him interested. He destroyed my self-worth piece by piece, and I let him because I believed I deserved it. The room was completely silent now. When I finally left him, I thought that was the end. I thought I'd healed. I found love again with a man who actually knows what respect means. I glanced at Elias, who was watching me with such fierce pride it made my throat tight. I got pregnant, which doctors had told me was unlikely. I started to believe that maybe I wasn't broken after all. I paused, collecting my thoughts. And then my ex-husband saw me in a parking lot and decided to remind me of everything he'd made me feel. He humiliated me in public. His mistress laughed. Bystanders recorded. And for a moment, just a moment, I believed him again. I believed I was cursed. That I'd lose this baby. That I deserved his cruelty. Tears were falling now, but I didn't wipe them away. But here's what I learned. Healing isn't linear. You can be strong and still have moments of weakness. You can have done the therapy, read the books, built the new life, and still flinch when someone aims for your old wounds. That doesn't mean you haven't healed. It means you're human. I looked out at the crowd, saw women nodding, saw men looking uncomfortable, saw faces streaming with tears. My ex-husband lost everything recently. His company, his wealth, his reputation. People keep asking me if I feel vindicated, if I'm happy about his downfall. And the truth is, I don't feel anything about him anymore. He's irrelevant. He's a footnote. He's the chapter I had to survive to get to the good part of my story. I placed my hand on my belly. This is the good part. My husband, my son, my peace, my life. This is what I survived for. And if sharing my story helps even one woman realize she deserves better, then every moment of pain was worth it. The applause was deafening. People stood, and I stood there shocked, overwhelmed, held together only by Elias's steady presence beside me. Later that night, lying in bed with Elias's arm around me and our son doing somersaults inside my belly, I felt something shift. Not healing exactly. More like acceptance. Miles had hurt me. That was true. But he hadn't broken me. Not permanently. Not in any way that mattered. "You were incredible tonight," Elias murmured against my hair. "Do you know that? You were absolutely incredible." I was terrified. Being brave doesn't mean not being scared. It means being scared and doing it anyway. He pressed a kiss to my temple. "I'm so proud of you, Clara. So impossibly proud." "Did you see Miles's face in the back of the room?" Elias tensed. "He was there?" "Just for a moment. He left before I finished speaking. But I saw him. And Elias?" I turned to look at my husband. I didn't feel anything. No anger, no fear, no hurt. Just nothing. He's nothing to me now. "Good," Elias said simply. "He should be nothing. He deserves to be nothing." 2 months later, I went into labor at 3 a.m. Elias, who I'd worried would panic and be useless during childbirth, was calm and focused and exactly what I needed. He held my hand through contractions, coached my breathing, and didn't once complain when I squeezed his fingers hard enough to leave bruises. 14 hours later, our son was born. 7 pounds, 9 ounces of perfect, screaming, beautiful baby boy. "Oliver," I whispered, holding him for the first time. "His name is Oliver," Elias cried. Actually cried, tears streaming down his face as he looked at our son. "He's perfect. Clara, he's absolutely perfect." He leaned down, kissing both of us. Thank you for him. Thank you for us. Thank you for being brave enough to leave Miles and find me. Thank you for proving that good men exist, I replied. Thank you for showing me what love is supposed to feel like. When we left the hospital 3 days later, there was a crowd waiting. Not reporters this time, though there were a few of those too, mostly just people. Regular people holding signs and flowers and cards. Welcome, baby Oliver. Congratulations, Clara and Elias. You deserve all the happiness. Love wins. It was overwhelming and beautiful and so far removed from anything I'd experienced in my marriage to Miles that I almost couldn't process it. Security kept them at a respectful distance, but I rolled down the window, called out, "Thank you," and meant it with my whole heart. 6 months later, on Oliver's half-birthday, I ran into Miles one last time. I was at a small cafe in Chelsea, having coffee with a friend while Elias watched Oliver at home. Miles walked in, didn't see me at first, and went to the counter to order. He looked different, older, tired. His expensive suits had been replaced with off-the-rack clothing. His luxury watch was gone. His hair was graying at the temples in a way that made him look distinguished before, but now just made him look worn. When he turned and saw me, he froze. For a moment, we just stared at each other. Then Miles approached, his steps hesitant in a way that was so unlike the confident man I'd married. "Clara," he said, "can we talk? Please?" My friend started to protest, but I held up a hand. "It's fine. I'll be right back." We stepped outside, standing on the sidewalk in awkward silence. Miles shoved his hands in his pockets, looking everywhere but at me. "I'm sorry," he said finally, "for everything, for how I treated you during our marriage, for what I said in the parking lot, for all of it. I was cruel, and you didn't deserve it." I studied him, looking for signs of manipulation, for hidden agendas. But all I saw was a broken man who'd finally realized the cost of his cruelty. "Thank you for saying that," I replied carefully. "But I need you to understand something. Miles, that apology is years too late. You didn't just hurt me. You tried to destroy me. You took my trauma and weaponized it. You made me believe I was defective and worthless and unlovable. It took years of therapy and an incredible man to undo that damage." I know, and I'm not finished." My voice was firm. "You're apologizing now because you lost everything, because you're alone and struggling and finally experiencing a fraction of the pain you inflicted on others. But if you still had your company, your wealth, your status, you wouldn't be here. You wouldn't care. This apology is about you, not me. It's about you feeling better, not about me healing." Miles flinched but didn't argue. "I've moved on," I continued. "I have a husband who respects me, a son who's healthy and perfect, and a life I never thought I'd have. You're not part of that life. You're not part of any life I want to build. So I accept your apology because I think you mean it. But I also want you to understand that it doesn't change anything. We're done, Miles. Permanently." He nodded slowly. "How is he? Your son?" "Perfect. Absolutely perfect." I pulled out my phone, showed him a photo of Oliver laughing in his father's arms. "Everything you said I couldn't have, I have. Everything you tried to convince me was impossible became reality. Not because of magic or luck, but because I found someone who actually loved me." Miles stared at the photo for a long moment. "He looks happy. You look happy. I am happy. Finally, actually, genuinely happy." "Good," Miles said quietly. That's good, Clara. You deserve it." "I know I do. It just took me a long time to believe it." We stood there for another moment, and then Miles nodded, turned, and walked away. I watched him go, feeling nothing but relief. No anger, no satisfaction, no lingering pain. Just relief that this chapter was finally, completely closed. When I went back inside, my friend immediately asked, "Are you okay? What did he want?" To apologize, and to see that I'm happy. I sat down, taking a sip of my now cold coffee. And I am. I really, truly am. 2 years later, Elias and I had another baby. A daughter we named Hope, because that's what she represented. Hope that good things can last. Hope that healing is real. Hope that love doesn't have to hurt. Oliver was 2 years old, obsessed with trains and convinced his baby sister was his personal toy. Elias had expanded his company but made sure he was home for dinner every night. And I had started a foundation supporting women leaving abusive relationships, using my story to help others find their way out. Sometimes people asked if I regretted my marriage to Miles, if I wished I could go back and choose differently, avoid that pain entirely, and my answer was always the same. I regret that he hurt me, but I don't regret surviving him, because surviving him led me here, to Elias, to Oliver, to Hope, to this life I built from the ashes of who I used to be. Miles tried to break me, but broken things can be rebuilt into something stronger, something beautiful, something that glitters in the light instead of hiding in the shadows. Clara Blackwood, formerly Whitmore, formerly Grantham, but always, fundamentally herself, had learned something crucial. Revenge wasn't sweet. Justice wasn't satisfying, but healing was everything, and she'd healed not by destroying her enemy, but by building a life so full of love that there was simply no room left for hate. Miles had called her broken. The world had called her inspiring, but Clara knew the truth. She was neither broken nor inspiring. She was simply human, flawed and strong, scared and brave, wounded and healed all at once. She was a woman who'd survived the unsurvivable and chosen to live, really live, on the other side. And that, she decided, was more than enough. If you enjoy this story and want more like it, make sure to subscribe, like, and share. See you in the next story.